Cloud. Okay, so I have started the recording. Lovely. Where are our questions? Okay, so Jan, we have question number 1. Could you share some examples of joyful writing assessment?
Okay, so that sounds as though that means joyful for the student. So let me just talk about that first, but I also want to talk about joyful for the marker. So joyful assessment would be assessment where students can bring what values to them into an academic environment and still be engaging with, rigor and according to disciplinary expectations, but they're bringing something that values to them, and they can look at a situation and think, engage with it and think, I don't just have to go through these steps or through these hoops because someone tells me to. There's something interesting and worthwhile doing here. Now, what counts as interesting might change. Sometimes in STEM subjects, these might be little bits of building blocks of knowledge, which aren't in themselves all that joyful. But the student can know that if they build up those blocks, they get to that really exciting stuff. So I think assessment that allows the student to have a sense of themselves and their values and what they bring, and creativity and decision making, and that's what responsibility is, where they're allowed to make a decision. So some places, for example, dissertations, in order to manage workload, dissertations are randomly assigned students are told which topics they have to write on. So only 5 topic students can write on feedback, and only 5 students can write on assessment, because that spreads the workload. That's the wrong way round. The student should pursue what they do, and we should be better at being generalists a lot of the time. But secondly, what I want to do, because if we don't do this, we can never fulfill what we're doing as educators. We have to feel joy when we assess. And I know that for most people in academic life, that's just absolutely impossible. The timeframes we work to, with the best of all intentions, the joy goes out by maybe, the 50th essay on the same thing, doesn't it? When you're up till, midnight and slow turnaround. So what we have to do is we have to build space in for assessment to really be recognised as not that bit on the end. And our practices are lagging behind where the educational research has gone here. We know that assessment is this rich learning moment, but it's trying to get managers to understand that we need radical curriculum reform over time. We can't do it all today or tomorrow, that builds in space for assessment. And where do we get that space from? Maybe we think about, are we overdoing content? Because there's still an issue that we feel that we're not doing our job unless we get through 12 topics. But what's the point of getting through 12 topics if the students only remember 6? Why not go through 6 and everyone remembers? Not that learning's about remembering. I have to be careful with my language, but do you know what I mean? I think we have to think around this creatively, but the joy has to be mutual. It has to be a two-sided thing of a student thinking, I've worked on this and I'm proud of my achievement. I know I haven't got there yet, but I'm proud of this. And then trusting that they can give it to an academic who says, I'm excited to read your work. And who genuinely is able to say that, not just saying that because we're nice people and we know that we have to say that.
Thank you. That's fantastic. So the relevance, I think this is what strikes me. It has to be maybe not only relevant, but also exciting for the student. And then what is exciting for the student, it then becomes exciting for the marker. Right, the second question, Jan, how do we drive transformational learning and assessment in a wider educational context that is predominantly instrumental?
Okay, this is a good time for me to address something that it came up in one of the chats, and the person who said it, please don't worry, because I get this sort of comment a lot about whether what I'm talking about with assessment is just naive. That in an instrumental system, trust is gone. There's no way we're going to be honest with students about how much time we really spend marking, and so on and so on. And I want to say that when I use these terms and when I go to meetings at my own university or elsewhere and I impose them into the conversations, I'm doing it deliberately. I'm naive to the extent that I believe that these are things of value, but I'm not believing thinking that it's just a matter of going up to senior management or the Minister for Higher Education and say, you know what, all this instrumental stuff, it's not really good. We should just be nicer. I know that's not the solution. But at the same time, I do genuinely believe that if we change our practices, we can at least do some good. We can certainly do more good by trying to find those little spaces where we can affect change than if we do nothing and become cynical, and rightly cynical, because we work in an instrumental and managerialist higher education system. So for me, my own self-preservation involves keeping these values alive in my own practice, because if I give up on them, then I've just got, you know, well, what if there's just nothing left? So I know it seems naive, but just today, actually, I was in a really senior meeting where I got a very senior person to accept, he had no chance because I was so reasonable in the way I said it, to accept that decisions about teaching should be pedagogically informed. Now, you know, you just keep going. How about we get in meetings? How about we all start using the word compassion when we're talking about our students? Because some colleagues say, oh, I don't have time for that. Well, you know, let's push back on that. Since when do you not have time for compassion? We're not talking about you taking an afternoon off to, you know, make cups of tea for a student. We're just talking about what inspires us when we engage with them and when we engage with them on an assessment platform. So on the one hand, I feel it's all doom and gloom, although I don't think this instrumental managerialist system is sustainable, and I think it will crack. On the other hand, I think that we have to decide on a personal level, but hopefully with solidarity with one another's, that we're going to find ways of resistance. Now, they might be quite quiet, and I'm very aware I'm in a little bit of a privileged position because I work in a sort of department where I can say these sorts of things and some people aren't. But, you know, we work together. And I really, as I said earlier, assessment for social justice isn't just about students, it's about us as academics. Because if we continue to let the joy drain out of what we do, it just would be so sad, because this is potentially a wonderful job, isn't it? I mean, it really, really is. But I know for some people out there, it's really crappy at the same time at the moment, you know. And so I don't want to seem the wrong sort of naive, but does that, that's not a really practical solution. Although actually, see, I think it is a practical solution. I believe in that theory and practice go together. And I do believe that thinking differently is a big part of change, but I'm not naive that that's going to change the world overnight.
Thank you very much, Jan. Fantastic. I think we've got four more questions. I'm not sure whether you will manage to address them all, but let's see.
Try and be quicker.
Okay. Critical theory research in decolonial times. Can you share some of your thoughts on your new research study?
I'd be really happy to, but I'm aware it might not interest everyone. So whoever wrote that, please follow up. It is basically just an argument saying that the potential of critical theory to inform social justice, we need to address the fact that it's never fully addressed race or racism or coloniality. So that paper is very dear to my heart, because if you've read my book, you know I use critical theory, but the time came for me to be honest with the world and say critical theory in a decolonial age is in a very bad place. So I'll just say that briefly, if I may, and try and get, I think the next one is about remote online learning.
That's right, yes. Has online remote learning and the rise of home-based assessment, inability to conduct time-constrained assessment in controlled conditions, provided us with any hope for the future of assessment. So that's a question. I didn't read it as a question, but you can see it, Jan, right? And everybody can see it.
I think it does. I think it does. If this time we try and really hold our ground about the technocratic solution, because if we just let proctoring software firms take this over, then we will have established a very unjust and worrisome form of assessment. If we convince our universities to save their money and think and redesign the assessment, because I believe strongly in academic integrity. The fact I talk about trust and all of that does not mean that I don't think it's really awful if a student is dishonest. I think most of the time students make mistakes rather than being dishonest. But academic integrity is important. But the idea that we can buy a piece of software and that will secure it is the wrong way of looking at it. We have to rethink the form of assessment. And I'm quite pleased to say in my own institution, when I said that in the middle of 2020, most people said to me, oh, Jan, I just can't agree with you there. Just can't agree with you. The middle of 2021, there were some people saying, you know, Jan, you may have had a point all along. We could think about this differently. And a worrying anecdote, though, there was somebody once who contacted our department to say, could somebody talk to them about proctoring software? So my head of department said, well, you could go and talk to X about the technical issues, and you can go and talk to Jan about the educational issues. Guess who they talked to? And it wasn't me. No. So we're not going to be invited into this conversation. We're going to have to put ourselves into it. But I do see some hopeful signs of academics who are prepared, who can see the risk of going down the proctoring software route, who are prepared to try and look at alternatives. Again, though, it is tough. I know it's tough.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry, I forgot I muted myself. The next, thank you, Jan. The next one is about reflective statements, sorry. Students reflecting on their learning and writing about it. Would this be more joyful?
Yeah, well, see, I think it brings together a lot of stuff, wouldn't it? Because it could bring together them trusting us, because students don't trust us when it comes to assessment. I'm not talking about you individually. I'm talking about the generic idea of the assessor as someone who's looking for mistakes, as someone who's looking for plagiarism, who's looking to see, you know, they're going to get it wrong. So if we said to students, you can open yourselves up here and tell us about the journey you went through and that you made mistakes and that they're forgivable mistakes, I think that could be really good. But I do think there's a big issue of trust, because I did some research with a colleague where we looked at directed feedback, you know, sort of where the student says, I want you to feedback on 3 things. Now, in his module, because he's a very good teacher and has a lot of trust, it worked brilliantly. We then took it to some completely random other courses. We had over 6,000 opportunities for students to ask, and they didn't. I think 3 did or something. And in fact, in one case where a student asked, the assessor came back, well, that's a very stupid thing to do, isn't it? What, you're wanting me, you're telling me what you think the problems are in your work. So the students won't do it automatically. You have to create the environment for that.
Lovely, thank you very much. We have 2 further questions, but I really don't, yes, I don't know how you think fast you could answer those. Maybe just this last one, if you think you can have a brief answer for that one. Not the last one, the next one I meant. Have many of these terms like compassion, etc., been colonized by those with another business agenda? And that's our last question.
Absolutely, they have. But I don't think we can spend all our time going around trying to find new words, because it'll just become an arms race, because every time we come up with a good word, these people will nick it to try and make a fast buck. So I think what we do is we push back and we say, no, actually compassion means something. It doesn't mean something precisely defined, but we push back at the empty rhetoric. So if you want to say that you have a compassionate system, tell us what's compassionate about it. If you want to say you're a university that cares about the student experience, show me the places where that happens. So I want to keep these words. I had this conversation last night. Someone said, oh, you can't use social justice, Jan, because it could mean so many different things. Yeah, but I don't want people. That's a good excuse not to engage with social justice. So let's use the terms. Let's use them well. And again, in those meetings where other people use these terms in an empty way, I'm sure we can, look, we're the most well-educated workforce in the world, academics. We can find a way to just politely say, you know, actually, I'm not sure that is compassion that you're talking about. You know, you're saying this is what compassion looks like. So that would be my thing. And the final thing on, I saw the question on trust and turn it in and all of that.
Thank you.
I know this comes up all the time.
Yes.
So the problem I have is that we have created a system of moral panic where students are so worried about not being caught plagiarizing that it's really hard to engage with why we write well, why we give credit to others, why we engage with the ideas of others. What's the positive thing we do there? And most of the things Turnitin finds, in my experience, are cases of students who've made mistakes, who've referenced badly. So it's not helping us find the so-called cheats. They're going off and buying an essay and bringing it and submitting it. You know, now that doesn't work that well either. But the idea that Turnitin is picking up intentional plagiarism is for me problematic. And the idea, whether we use this technology or not, we have to stop the moral panic that all a student's meant to do in their undergraduate degree is not be caught plagiarizing, rather than saying what they should be doing is engaging creatively with the minds of others. And again, if they make a mistake, we point that out, but we have to tell them why writing according to certain conventions matters, not how. All my students, I find, they always ask me how questions, and I say to them, well, that's not the question. You have to ask the why question, then the how will become self-evident. And I think that's the same with academic writing. And it just worries me, this obsession with plagiarism. And I looked today at, I was sent something by an essay mill. It was clearly a contract cheating company. And over and over and over in the text to students, it was saying, we can guarantee this isn't plagiarism. This isn't plagiarism. We'll give you a plagiarism guarantee. So the student looks at that and thinks, well, this is okay, because the only thing I have to worry about is not plagiarizing. So that's my concern in a nutshell. And I know it's very difficult if you've got a big undergraduate class. I don't have a solution here. I really just have some questions, I suppose.
Thank you. That's fantastic, Jan. Thank you ever so much for answering those questions. Lovely. I'm going to stop the recording now.